Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we are going through Week 11, everybody. And by Week 11, I mean kinda. I got 10 questions on the docket that will relate to storylines in Week 11, but also sometimes good to take a step back and approach the league as a whole, look at some more things long-term. So I have a very special guest to accomplish this task with me, managing editor at the Raiders Wire, host of Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Dynasty, writer at bookies.com and Sportsbook Wire, Marcus Mosher. You can find him on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Marcus, thank you for the time, man. How's it going?
It's going well, Ian. I'm excited for this little home and home. You came on my show a couple of weeks ago, and I'm excited to return the favor.
That's right, man. We were talking some good old rookie running backs, what they might have moving forward in Dynasty. I think we might have a question or two that's similar today. So without further ado, man, let's get to it. Question number one. So I want to talk about Kyler Murray because right now he is currently averaging the most fantasy points per game in 2020 that any QB in NFL history has managed in a single season. 2019, Lamar Jackson spoiled us. 2020, Kyler Murray somehow has been even better. So in Dynasty land, how many, if any, quarterbacks would you want ahead of Murray for the next decade?
Yeah, so Kyler is so fascinating because it's not necessarily like a Lamar Jackson thing because I think we're seeing him win every single week with his arm and be pretty consistent that way. But the rushing totals are just fantastic every week. There's always a chance for 100 yards. You think you're going to get a touchdown every single week. When it comes to actually ranking him, man, there's really not that many guys you would take over him, right? I mean, obviously Patrick Mahomes because of the ceiling. And then, I think we can have a conversation about everybody else, right? Like if you want to go Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson, okay, we can do that. I like Kyler's age better. I like the athleticism and the rushing upside. We could talk about Dak Prescott, who was playing really well early on in the season. Now he's fighting an injury. He's a little older, doesn't rush as much. I'm taking Kyler. Deshaun Watson, you don't trust anything around him, right? I mean, nothing. And then Lamar Jackson, who has really struggled this year. So I think right now, as of going into Week 11, Kyler Murray is the clear-cut quarterback 2 in Dynasty, and that's crazy that we got here in just a year and a half.
It is, man. I think we all knew like some sort of year two. It's not like people didn't expect Kyler to take a nice little jump forward in year two, but this has been wild, man. Because to your point, the rushing production on top of what he's been able to do as a passer, just absolutely wild. And I mean, I saw DeAndre Hopkins tweet about, one of those tweets that said the Cardinals have the number one offense because of total yards, which we can bark about that being an issue another day. But Hopkins was saying we haven't even reached our peak yet. And we're a number one offense. That's kind of what it feels like, man, because we see Kyler, the rushing's been insane. Had the incredible Hail Mary. We know he's got the arm talent, but Cowboys game, I think he went like 9 for 25 or something like that. Like we haven't quite seen the passing game click consistently, even though we've seen kind of the high end talent there. So we know we got Kyler and Hopkins. Christian Kirk is someone with the Cardinals that I just haven't quite come around on maybe the manner I should, because he's been playing some great ball this year. Is he someone that you think has a long-term spot in this Cardinals offense, or is he kind of just more of a guy right now, kind of getting just the production off of Kyler Murray, not someone that's going to continue to be a main guy in this offense moving forward?
Yeah, Kirk is interesting because, he only has 4 games this season over 50 yards. I think he's going to be such a week-to-week play. Like we saw against Miami, 120 yards and a touchdown. And then against Buffalo last week, only 4 catches for 27 yards. Yeah. I've got a feeling that long-term, the Cardinals are just going to streamline those other positions, right? Other than DeAndre Hopkins, who they'll keep and they'll pay, they're just going to draft and replace receivers over and over again. So Kirk is on the 3rd year of his rookie deal. I mean, he's nice as a wide receiver 3, flex play some weeks, but I don't think he holds any long-term dynasty value just because I just don't believe that they're going to continue to pay those type of players.
No, I think that's a very fair ranking, and I am in agreement with you there. All right, man, next question. So Big Ben has been throwing the ball all over the place in recent weeks after looking more like a game manager during the first 2 months of the season. I mean, any James Conner fantasy managers out there just must be tilting their face off with these kind of last 2 duds and, seemingly just absolute smash spots. So we've seen each of Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and Juju Smith-Schuster put together some solid performances in recent weeks. Certainly all 3 can maintain some level of fantasy goodness in 2020, but how would you rank these Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers as dynasty options moving forward? Because as we've seen at different points, I mean, they can all ball. It's just a matter of who's going to get the volume on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, this is a question I'm actually curious to hear from you. This is tough because I think everybody is in agreement that Juju is probably leaving this offseason, right?
Yeah.
Pittsburgh just doesn't have the salary cap to pay him. So he's probably leaving, let's say, the New York Jets. That feels like a right spot for him, right? I see Juju leaving. So now it comes down to Deontay and Claypool. Claypool has the touchdowns this year. He's on pace for 16, on pace for 900 total yards, though, which seems kind of weird with that touchdown ceiling.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's Deontay Johnson. We've seen this season, whenever he's played 50 or more snaps, he's the wide receiver one in this offense. He's averaging over 10 targets per game. We saw last week against Cincinnati him get some red zone targets. Ben Roethlisberger likes to throw to the guys that get open quickly. He trusts those type of players. He might not have the touchdown ceiling of a Claypool, but I think the yards, the targets, the receptions all favor Deontay Johnson, and that's where I'm heading.
I think I would go with Claypool just for that pure upside, that you're kind of speaking of with the touchdowns. I mean, the fact this guy has done so much already this early in his career, absolutely wild. And, when they drafted him, it's been an organization that, I mean, how many wide receivers have the Steelers hit on over the past decade? It's been wild. But the only wide receivers since 2000 that the Steelers have spent higher draft capital on than Chase Claypool, Plaxico Burress, and Santonio Holmes. So it's not like he's come out of absolutely nowhere. We heard the reports all training camp about this guy blowing up. But to your point, Deontay Johnson, man, he does all those things underneath. But then we got that clip last week of him toasting William Jackson on a nice little stutter step go, 40 yards down the field. So I think maybe we could be looking at a situation where, I agree with you. I think Juju is probably, playing somewhere else in 2021 and beyond. Maybe in 2021 and beyond in Pittsburgh, we get Claypool and Deontay Johnson being, borderline fantasy wide receiver ones, at least for a few years, because I think both guys have the talent to do so. We just need a little more concentrated target share here moving forward.
Yeah, I was going to say really quickly, if you're taking Claypool, you're betting on the upside, right? Because he's got the better athleticism and the better size. Again, you're also looking long-term here because how long is Ben Roethlisberger going to be around? Like if we get a new quarterback there, it's probably more likely that they're going to want to throw to this absolute freak on the outside rather than, a less than stellar athlete in Deontay Johnson, who is also small and is inconsistent and drops a bunch of passes. But for this year and maybe 2021, I think I like Johnson just because of that connection with Roethlisberger.
Can we agree the Mapletron nickname is awful? Like, can we stop that?
We'll come up with something better, but that one's bad.
We'll work on it. All right. Sticking in the AFC North. So Lamar Jackson, this Ravens offense has looked borderline broken in recent weeks. We got reports coming out with Lamar saying that defenses know what they're running. Now we got Nick Boyle getting hurt. So maybe we got to see more wide receivers out there. PFF's own Mike Renner wrote a good piece on PFF that you all should check out, talking about, the issues with this Ravens offense. But anyway, despite this, we've still seen Lamar function as a near every week QB1 thanks to his ever absurd rushing floor, just not the same game-breaking performance we saw in 2019. How confident are you in the Ravens' ability to turn the ship around on offense in 2020 and beyond?
I'm not all that confident in 2020 just because they've had so many injuries, on the offensive line with Boyle, who basically serves as an extra offensive lineman. No Ronnie Stanley, no Tyree Phillips. They lost Marshall Yanda in the offseason, due to retirement. And I think that had a bigger effect on this team than what anybody's mentioning. So to lose three of your, top five offensive linemen halfway through the season, you're just not going to get those guys back by the end of the year. There's just not that much depth in the NFL at offensive line. So I think this is going to be a long-term process. I do believe in 2021, 2022, once the Ravens invest some more assets into their wide receiver core, into the offensive line, maybe once Greg Roman takes a step back and makes some adjustments here, I think they'll be okay. I also think there's a little bit of an injury thing going on here. Remember, Lamar Jackson got hurt, banged up his knee a few weeks ago, missed a lot of practice. And then from that point on, we really haven't seen all that efficient of a passer. Even his rushing has dropped in the last couple of weeks as well, his efficiency. I just don't know. I don't feel all that confident that it gets fixed this season, but I do believe in the talent. I do believe in that organization. They'll eventually figure it out. They'll find ways to make that passing offense more efficient. I'm just not so sold that they're going to be fixed this year.
Yeah, no, we haven't seen much on film, and just throughout their games to indicate that a turnaround is on the way. Maybe the schedule, because it is lightening up. We got the Titans, unfortunate matchup against the Steelers, and then through fantasy championship Sunday, Cowboys, Browns, Jaguars, Giants. So maybe they can't get it going. But to your point, I don't think we've really seen much to indicate that will be the case. But man, with this offense, can we just get Lamar a legit wide receiver one? No offense to Hollywood Brown. Like, the guy is fine, but you look at, Josh Allen getting freaking Stephon Diggs at it. You look at the Browns giving Baker OBJ, and you look at, just Kyler getting DeAndre Hopkins. Like, we see again and again a quarterback, they lose a number one wide receiver and their efficiency falls off because we want to have number one wide receivers for great quarterbacks. I mean, we heard the rumors with AB going to Baltimore. That kind of made so much sense. It seems like in the 2021 offseason, wide receiver and just pass catcher in general, far and away has to be the Ravens' number one priority.
Yeah, and I guess the question for me is, what type of receiver would fit well with Lamar Jackson? Is it the guy that can stretch the field? Because I actually don't think it's the Hollywood Brown type, right? Yeah. I don't think that it is that. I think it's more likely to be this Stephon Diggs, the guys that get open really quickly. Even, again, this guy's not a wide receiver one, but he's one of my favorites in football. A Cole Beasley type in this offense that can just win against man coverage anytime is somebody that they need. I'm kind of done with Willie Snead, even though he's been productive over the last couple of weeks. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Ian? What type of receiver would you like to see Lamar get?
I think you nailed it. And honestly, I think in today's NFL, we want that separation guy more times than not. And this is coming as someone that loves himself some Auden Tate and receivers like that, that jump ball 50-50, just more physical guy. That's great. But, I think we saw those Carolina Panthers teams in the mid 2010s, Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funches. Let's try to help our not so accurate quarterback by getting these bigger guys that are kind of always open. But I think we've seen that is not really the best way to do it. We want someone that the quarterbacks can see get open, someone like we shouldn't even say someone like Stephon Diggs because there's so few receivers in the league that are as good as him. But yes, to your point, someone that can create underneath intermediate areas of the field more so than downfield, because I think those type of throws, down the sideline deep, the stuff that Marquise Brown, Michael Gallup, all these different guys live on that we see the more volatile, up and down production. I think that's just kind of a life of throwing those types of, passes to begin with. So
what about a big slot? What if they got somebody like a Juju Smith-Schuster that could, make some of the contested catches in the middle of the field and make plays after the catch? Would that make some sense?
Let's do it, man. Sounds good to me. And let's just get some more speed out there, because I think, with their, them losing those three offensive linemen, like you said, and now Boyle, who essentially is another one. I mean, you take that away, and that takes away kind of their power run identity. So they need to change something. You got Duvernay out there. He's showing a little bit of a spark. Miles Boykin, when they have used him, has done something. Let's start going 3 or 4 wide receivers and just get some overall speed out there, man. So yeah, but I do like that Juju call. That's gonna be interesting where he ends up, because I really think, you mentioned Lamar being banged up. Juju's another guy that I just don't think, by and large, we've seen a healthy version of over the past few years. Football is more fun with a healthy Juju Smith-Schuster. So hopefully he heals up in the future. Moving on to some running back stuff. So DeAndre Swift looked absolutely spectacular last week, man. Oh my goodness. And he actually gained full control of the backfield in terms of snaps in the game that featured plenty of positive game scripts. So what are your general thoughts on Swift's ceiling in 2020 and beyond? I mean, do you think he has what it takes, with this sort of every down role to pretty much emerge as a top 5 fantasy option at the position?
Well, let me do it like this, Ian. These are the running backs in Dynasty that I would prefer over DeAndre Swift from now on. Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, and it stops.
Ooh.
Right? Because you look at the rest of those guys, they all have significant problems, right? Ezekiel Elliott is trending towards being washed, right? Yeah. J.K. Dobbins is in an offense that is kind of broken right now. Jonathan Taylor is really struggling. Josh Jacobs is a week-to-week play. Joe Mixon can't stay healthy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is kind of being a bust right now in Kansas City a little bit. So you just go down the line, and it's like there's just not that many guys that have, this kind of athleticism, that are in an offense that are going to feed him 20-plus touches a game, that can get this kind of floor in the passing game. I love me some DeAndre Swift. I thought what we saw last week against Washington was fantastic. I think as he becomes more comfortable in that offense, and as they scheme him up more touches, he's going to be an absolute superstar. This is why so many people absolutely loved him coming out of Georgia, right? I think for the longest time, we thought he was going to be maybe the first running back drafted in the class. He goes to Detroit, and we all forget about him for whatever reason. He gets hurt, and then his dynasty value just plummets. He drops that pass in week 1. I'm completely back, Ian. I think DeAndre Swift is going to become a star.
I was just worried about what he could do this year because it never made sense for them to bring in Adrian Peterson in early September and to give him the sort of role that they ended up giving him. But here we are. And like I said, I mean, we've seen Swift have higher snap counts and higher, touch games before, but those were always coming just in negative games, Chris, where he is their pass down back. He is the guy out there. But for them to really lean on him this way, that's fantastic. We saw them try to do it with Kerryon Johnson over the past 2 years. Guy just couldn't stay healthy. And listen to Kerryon himself. He told us in August that Swift just moves in a different way that not even he can kind of replicate or learn from. So Kerryon, man, stick up for yourself a little bit, have that confidence. But yeah, man, with DeAndre, I haven't gone through and made the dynasty rankings quite like yourself, but I do struggle to find 5-6 guys we want more moving forward. He seems like the perfect kind of modern day running back, man, that can just thrive in almost any offense. And he's so good as a pass catcher. And you know what? Matthew Stafford, maybe he's not this top 5 quarterback that we've hoped for him to be, but not a bad guy to be attached to for the next 5-6 years.
No, and if we've learned anything about Matthew Stafford over the last decade, is that he just funnels targets to the running backs, right? And if he gets a competent guy that he can trust, that guy could potentially get 100 targets in a season. So I love DeAndre Swift going forward. I think if they start to use him more in the red zone, on the goal line, there's really no reason why he can't jump up to be number 3, number 2 dynasty running back. He just has that type of ceiling.
Ceiling is the roof for sure. All right, another running back that unfortunately has a chance for triple-digit targets some years. That is J.D. McKissic, who haunts my dreams at this point as a long time dating all the way back to August Antonio Gibson truther. So look, McKissic, he's a perfectly fine scat back, but the fact he leads the NFL, not running backs, he leads the NFL in targets over the past 2 weeks, and that is absolutely wild. He's a great check down option. I get it, but why does this man have a full 14 additional targets in the slot and not wide? Next closest RB. Come on, man. This is Antonio Gibson truther right here is tilted. Do you see McKissic ever getting relegated to the bench in 2020? Or dare I say, because I was looking at over the cap yesterday, I mean, they have him signed into 2021. Like, is this going to be Antonio Gibson season at least in 2021? Or are we going to be having the same conversation next year, Marcus?
Yeah, I think this is good news for Antonio Gibson. I know it's rough watching J.D. McKissic gobble up all those targets right now, but we've heard the Washington coaches say over the last couple of weeks that Gibson needs to improve as a pass blocker, and then he'll get more opportunities on passing downs. I think eventually they're going to get there. Now, what we are seeing is that this offense is just going to absolutely funnel targets to the running backs. I'm not sure who the quarterback is going to be next year. I don't think anybody really knows. But this offense, they want to give the ball to their playmakers, and I think there's a chance at 2021 that Gibson does see, 50 to 60 receptions. I mean, my goodness, you see what McKissic is doing over the last, 7 games. He has 26 targets. Gibson has 26 targets over the last 7 games. So even in a part-time role, he's getting fed in the passing game. Can you imagine what we'd be talking about for Antonio Gibson if he gets 75, 80 targets in a season? I think there's actually legit RB1 potential here. We have to remember, though, Gibson was a guy that was really a wide receiver at Memphis, still learning the position. I know a lot of people were hoping that he would turn into this superstar running back in year 1. It's going to take him a while, but I think the signs are there for us to be really excited about his future.
Yeah, and it's also been surprising to me that this has been the issue. I would have thought that, a Peyton Barber or a Bryce Love type that's getting more of the early down work, has more experience, just being a true running back in NFL offense. I thought that would be the type of talent keeping Gibson off the field. So, Gibson, what was it, 70 touches or something he had like in college? Like, we always knew this could be more of a projection than usual. How did you kind of treat that coming out of the process? I mean, was Gibson someone that you were just staying away from because we didn't have enough info, or were they kind of just, sky high athletic kind of intangibles is too much for you to ignore?
Yeah, I think I liked Gibson late 3rd, early 4th round when you're just kind of gambling on talent, because what we saw when he had the ball in his hands was spectacular. His game against SMU last year was one of the best college games I've ever seen, winning in, the kick return game, out of the backfield, in the receiving game, out wide as a receiver. I just thought he was absolutely fantastic. Now, I knew there was going to be a little bit of a transition period, and maybe it's a little steeper than I initially thought. But again, you can see the flashes, and I'm sure Washington fans and Gibson dynasty owners can see them as well. The upside is just enormous. And I think with the right offense, with the right quarterback, it's going to be all systems go fairly soon. Just got to get through this rookie season. I anticipate him making a big leap in 2021. Again, remember, This is a weird offseason for rookies. They didn't have mini camps. We didn't have a preseason, and typically a guy like Gibson probably would have got a ton of work in the preseason, especially on pass protection and out of the receiving game. For him to be as valuable as he is, considering the change in position and this weird year, it's certainly encouraging.
It's frustrating because, he could have that Christian McCaffrey every down role. His current role has really still been fine. It's just, we're getting probably a little too greedy thinking about what it could be if, like you were saying, if he did have 70, 80% of those targets.
Well, remember Christian McCaffrey, even as a rookie, struggled, right? They didn't have him out on the field all that much. He only had 117 carries in his first season. So they really limited him as well. And then in his second year, it was blast off. So maybe we'll get a similar type of progression there from Gibson.
Believe it or not, people, these 21, 22-year-olds, they can get better. They can get better after a year or two in the NFL system. Not the wildest thing ever. So we're in week 11 now, and this has been a funky last few weeks on the waiver wire. I mean, some of the top running backs out there, Salvin Ahmed, Kalen Ballage, Mike Davis, and of course, my guy, Duke Johnson. Suddenly, they've been thrust into really featured roles out there, mostly functioning as clear backups beforehand. So do you feel particularly strong one way or another about the general talent level of any of these backups that I just mentioned, their ability to make the most out of this newfound usage? And that was Salvin Ahmed, Kalen Ballage, Mike Davis, Duke Johnson.
Well, you can't see it right now on my screen. We're doing this through a Zoom call, but I actually have a Duke Johnson jersey right next to me. So,
my guy.
Yeah, it's a Miami Duke Johnson jersey. So I'm a little biased here, but I think when you're going through these guys, Ballage, Mike Davis, I mean, they're all kind of the same, right? They're all just you don't feel great about the talent level of any of them. But what you really do is you're picking the situation here. Which team do you have the most confidence is going to feed their running backs? It's going to put them in situations where they can be functional and will have scoring chances. And for me, the answer is probably Kalen Ballage, maybe. I mean, that Chargers offense is just a lot of fun right now. Herbert's really moving the ball. I don't love any of the other options right now. Austin Eckler's going to be out for a while. We'll see about Justin Jackson. At least Kalen Ballage can kind of do some stuff, out of the backfield, and he's not the worst goal line running back. I don't know, man. None of them are great, but this is a weird season. You gotta find RB2s wherever you can find them.
Absolutely, man. Ballage was the guy that, on our waiver wire pod this week, I did say he's probably is the one you want to have because he just seems to have the best chance of being the feature back for at least not even this week, but next week as well. So Duke should be that guy as well. I think most people probably already scooped him up last week, but we got to believe, man, it was 1 week. I'm not getting off my Duke 3-down RB train after 1 week. The U's all-time leading rusher can have an okay game in a freaking monsoon, and we can go back to the well with him. How do you, in general, with these kind of backup running backs, are you willing to kind of just bet on talent in a situation where maybe they can get freed later? Or generally with running backs, is it do you just play the percentages of a guy, hey, if they can't figure it out in the first team, probably not going to work out?
Yeah, unfortunately, if they don't do it right away, there's very few examples of a running back leaving and then becoming a workhorse or an RB1. We really haven't seen it all that often, unless it's a special circumstance. And even a guy like Kareem Hunt, right? He was an RB1 in Kansas City, gets cut, and now he's in a part-time role. He's highly efficient, but he's probably never going to get a starting job again. So, I'm just using these guys to stream to get through the season. If I'm a Dynasty owner and I own any of these guys and someone's willing to flip me a pick for them, I'm doing it. I'm not trading for any of these guys, even if I need them to get through a season. I'm just not giving up any assets to go get a Kalen Ballage. Neither should NFL teams.
Yeah.
Little tip: don't give up any picks for Kalen Ballage.
I remember doing a study before the year, looking at just what years of a player's career they kind of peaked at each position in terms of fantasy. And running back, pretty much years 1 through 3, maybe 4. Wide receivers, we got the rookie contract and a little bump, year 5, year 6 as well. But truly, we talk about football being a young man's game. That's true, but particularly running back is the young man's game. Okay, question here 7. Thank you all for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast as always. But I want to talk about Drew Lock and this Broncos offense, particularly with Jerry Jeudy, because this has been a guy that, in my opinion, has looked like the single best route runner from this loaded 2020 wide receiver class. We've had some solid performances over the past few weeks, but it sure seems like we've only scratched the surface on what Jeudy can provide. How great do you think the Broncos rookie wide receiver can be down the stretch in 2020 and beyond? And how would you kind of put him in just the rankings of the 2020 wide receiver class?
Yeah, so if you watched last week's game against the Raiders, you'll see that Jerry Jeudy's stat line was not great. It was fine, but it wasn't anything that, you're going to write home about or you're going to brag about on Twitter. But if you really study that game, that could have easily been a 200-yard game for Jerry Jeudy. He was
game.
toasting Trayvon Mullen, who's a pretty good cornerback, and the Raiders had no answer. They were just so lucky that Drew Lock was a quarterback there, because otherwise they could have lost that game. And I think the Broncos are going to have a really interesting decision this offseason. They've got to get better at quarterback. I'm not a Drew Lock guy. I don't know, Ian, if you are, but they've got to get better at that position. And I think Jerry Jeudy is an absolute star. Now, where do you rank him in terms of dynasty rankings? It's tough because there's so much uncertainty around the quarterback. And when we're ranking these receivers, a lot of times we're pairing them to the quarterback that we're playing with. And that's why somebody like a Devontae Adams is so high in our rankings. He's number one in my dynasty rankings. A DK Metcalf is at number 2 because he's playing with Russell Wilson. I don't know what the solution is in Denver. I don't trust that John Elway is going to be able to find a quarterback. He really hasn't proven that he can outside of that 1 year or 2 years with Peyton Manning. So I'm probably a little bit lower on Jerry Jeudy than most. He's my number 24 receiver right now in Dynasty. But if you told me a year from now he's got a above average quarterback, he's probably inside the top 12.
Yeah, it matters so much. And about Drew Lock, I like the idea of Drew Lock, I think, more than what Drew Lock has actually been in reality. The guy's fearless out there. I feel like every time he throws the ball, like he 100% believes it's going to find his intended receiver. But as we've seen over the past few weeks, that usually is not the case. So yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. It does matter so much with the quarterback. I was talking to Field Yates on this pod last week, and it was like AJ Brown or DK Metcalf. And, we were looking at that situation from, hey, neutral, no coaches, no quarterbacks involved, because once you introduce the quarterbacks, like, yeah, it absolutely matters. And, probably, more and more with these wide receivers coming out and stuff, you don't want to be a slave to draft capital or slave to landing spot, as they like to say. But man, anytime we get that elite Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers quarterback, and we compare that with a rookie wide receiver, that's got to matter almost more than talent at some point.
Yeah, just let's flip Denzel Mims and Chase Claypool for a second, right? Imagine Chase Claypool getting thrown to by Sam Darnold and Joe Flacco. Does he have 9 touchdowns at this point through the season? Absolutely not. So the situation does matter a ton, and it should matter for your dynasty ranks too. If you don't trust a quarterback that's going to be delivering them the ball, I can't rank you as high as some of the other ones.
It's a great point. All right. I want to talk about Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman. Had a huge week 10, although, to me, watching the performance, the big play where everyone's saying Michael Pittman's going to be a monster, he kind of caught like a 10-yard crosser where no one guarded him and he ran for 40 yards, but he had over 100 yards, had a nice reverse in there as well. He looks, big, fast, strong. You can see the physical tools of why they drafted this dude in the first round. But with that said, we're just talking about wanting to pair guys in the good offenses and quarterbacks. Colts, we've had that game, and Marcus Johnson went over 100 yards once. Those are the only 2 times all year that a wide receiver in Indianapolis has cleared even 75 receiving yards. So am I underrating the potential for Pittman to kind of emerge as a bona fide stud as early as 2020, or is this Colts offense just a situation where we should probably be staying away from in terms of the wide receivers?
Yeah, I think Michael Pittman is going to be a player that has better NFL value than fantasy value, because he's a big body guy that can block on the outside, incredibly tough. I think whatever quarterback he has over the next couple of years is really going to trust him on third down, because he's got some really strong hands. I just don't know if that's necessarily going to translate into fantasy value, because he doesn't have a lot of long speed, so he's probably not going to be creating the big plays. I think he's okay after the catch, but he's not fantastic. He's going to need to be on a team that just feeds him targets where he's just he's getting 8 for 100 every single week. I don't see that being the Colts, considering how they want to play football. It seems like they want to be a ball control, heavy run type of team under Frank Wright. I like Michael Pittman, probably not somebody that I'm searching out to try to get in Dynasty. And again, I don't trust Phillip Rivers at all. So I'm probably out on Pittman for the rest of this season, although there probably will be the occasional big game here or there. But it's important to remember, before week 10, he had just one game over 40 yards before that. And I know he was hurt, but just not a big part of the offense. I'm not looking for him to become a relevant fantasy player over the next 5 or 6 weeks.
you can even go back like a half decade at this point, and Keenan Allen is the only wide receiver that Rivers has really consistently enabled the high-end fantasy production. So yeah, it's just too tough to really expect, Pittman or anyone else in Indy for that matter, to provide us with that consistent high-level production. Quick shout out to our sponsor before we get to these next two questions. Monkey Knife Fight. All first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 in their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a $40 value for just $20, and you'll get the opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest growing fantasy sports sites in the USA, Monkey Knife Fight. So go to Monkey Knife Fight, deposit your $20 with promo code PFF today to receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. All right, Marcus, I asked you about running backs and kind of them going on to future teams. And, I think you're correct in saying that we just don't really see backup running backs go elsewhere and have a bunch of success. I want to talk about that with wide receivers, though, because we have seen maybe not pure backups, but Brashad Perryman has reinvented his career in different stops. Robbie Anderson, escaped the Adam Gase shackles and has been absolutely balling ever since. And I want to talk about my guy, Auden Tate, the Bengals leader in yards per route run. Haters say he can't separate. I don't know what they call AJ Green at that point. But, firstly, do you have any thoughts on Tate specifically? And then more generally, how do you kind of approach these wide receivers as maybe someone to buy low on in a bad situation in hopes that they could improve elsewhere?
Yeah, first of all, Auden Tate should be playing over AJ Green. I don't know how much of that Steeler game you got to watch, but it's sad. AJ Green's completely washed. He played 83% of the snaps, didn't catch a single pass, was dropping balls all over the place, just can't get open. They've tried to turn him into like this intermediate, guy in the middle of the field trying to make some contested catches, and he's not interested. So it's over for AJ Green. Now, Auden Tate is interesting because what I saw at the end of the 2019 season was fantastic. I mean, he would make one or two just incredible grabs every single week. So I'm an Auden Tate guy, but can you play T. Higgins and Auden Tate, two guys that run, probably in the 4.6s on the outside? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think Joe Burrow is really good, and I think he can find ways to get those guys the football. So it's just something to keep in mind. But as of, buying low on some of these guys that are changing teams, it really depends on where they're going, right? If it's a guy like Brashad Perryman that's going to a team with competent quarterback play, like he did with Tampa Bay for a while, I think that makes a lot of sense. But it's the fit again, and this is really going to be the theme of this podcast. What quarterback you're tying yourself to is so important. If you go to a team just because you want a bunch of targets and you don't care about the quality of those targets, it's probably in the long term, these guys are probably not going to work out. So you want to go to a team with, quality quarterback play with consistent targets, consistent accuracy. And I would really say it's a case by case basis.
That's fair. And, if we want to stay in fairy tale land for a second, Packers offense, like that's the place we've been looking at for really the past two off seasons. Like, hey, let's add, our favorite backup wide receiver to Green Bay. Let them be Aaron Rodgers' guy. Do you have just a, special pet wide receiver that if you could take, your favorite wide receiver prospect and make them the Packers' number 2 wide receiver, who would it be in a best case scenario?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I think a lot of people are going to say Will Fuller, and that makes a lot of sense, right? I guess it would be probably Anthony Miller, right?
Nice.
I really liked Anthony Miller coming out of Memphis. He went to probably the worst possible situation in Chicago. I mean, my goodness, he was open all day, against I forget who
Vikings.
They played. Vikings. He was open all day against the Vikings, but Nick Foles is just not it. You put him in that offense. You let him play in the slot. You let him play on the outside. He's feasting against the number 2, number 3 receiver or cornerbacks on opposing defenses. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I love that call. Everything Miller has put on film has been fantastic. I was watching, I think it was their Rams primetime game a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned on the broadcast where it was like, oh, Anthony Miller was nominated by his teammates as most likely to be late to practice. And I was like, all that sporadic usage starting to make a little bit more sense, unfortunately. So, but yes.
Darnell Mooney, though, not bad too. Another guy that I wish could get out of Chicago. He's only been there for 10 weeks now, but I'm already counting down the days until he's a free agent.
Too funny, man. All right, last question for you, Marcus. Thank you for the time as always, man. So gonna get real loopy on this one. So aliens invade the planet and force us to defend the human race by playing a game of 11 on 11 football. Patrick Mahomes, he's sick and unavailable. You ask how sick, he's unavailable, out of the question. So who do you want at QB with the survival of humanity on the line in a game that would take place today? You know, looking at the obvious finalists, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. If you got someone else, that's fine, but who you picking?
So this is a difficult question because you're going to want somebody who, you know, is irrationally confident that they can beat just the Monstars or whatever, right? Kyler Murray's probably too small. Deshaun Watson can't overcome a bad offensive line. Russell Wilson's pretty tiny. Tom Brady can't really move. So I'm going with the outside the box answer. I want somebody that believes they're the best quarterback, you know, on the field any single time they play. A guy that just has a big arm that's not afraid to chuck it down the field. I want Jameis. I want Jameis as my quarterback because he's not going to be afraid of anybody. I mean, he might not be able to see the aliens considering how bad his eyes are, but I want Jameis out there for nothing else for entertainment purposes because he'd make it more fun.
That is absolutely fantastic. I've not gotten that answer with this question before. You want someone that's not going to blink when we got two aliens running down them in the pocket.
No.
It is Jameis Winston. Oh my goodness. Fantastic, man. All right. That is going to do it, everybody. Thank you as always for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Marcus, we can find you on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. What you got coming up, man? And where else can the people find you?
Yeah, busy week. We got a podcast coming out on the game day talking about our favorite picks this week. Lots of stuff on Sportsbook Wire. All my picks are at bookies.com. And then always Raider coverage at the Raiders Wire.
Awesome stuff, man. Everyone make sure you follow Marcus, always providing great stuff for the Raiders, for the Cowboys, and particularly in Dynasty land. Truly, you know, I think in all walks of life, you know, approaching things with a long-term view, probably in your better interest, and particularly in fantasy football, always good to take a break and do that as well. So he's Marcus. I'm Ian. Thank you as always for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.